Set up for a deadlift right now and freeze where your hands would reach the bar. If your lower back rounds there, the problem is probably not your core. Your hips ran out of hinge range first, so your lower back flexed to reach the bar. By the end, you'll know why your back rounds, how to spot the real cause, and the one setup change that stops it without trying to arch harder. We'll go through the bad advice first, then what your body is actually doing, then the fix for your next set. So start with the myth. You hear the same cues every time. Chest up, arch harder, brace harder. And then you do all of that and your lower back still rounds before the bar even moves. That feels like a discipline problem. Arching and bracing make your trunk stiffer. They do not give your hips more room to fold. If your hips stop first, your hands still have to reach the bar somehow. So the cue sounds useful, but it solves the wrong problem. You are trying to improve your top half position while your hips still cannot reach the start cleanly. That is why this gets so frustrating. You keep blaming your core, your focus, or your form. Usually, the setup is asking for range you do not have. Here's the better question. Can your hips actually get you to this bar height without your lower back changing shape? Ask that first. Everything else comes after. And once you ask it, the whole lift looks different because the round usually starts before the pull begins. Now the real cause. Your body is trying to reach the bar. You hinge back, your hamstrings load, then they hit their limit. But your hands still need another inch, maybe 2. So your lower back rounds to reach the last bit. That is the whole problem. A deadlift is supposed to be a hip hinge. The hips do the bending, the spine holds shape. When hip flexion runs out, the last bit of motion comes from the lumbar spine, your lower back, so your hands can still get to the bar. So the round is not random. It is a sign that the wrong joint is supplying the last bit of range under load. If you miss that, you keep training the compensation and start calling it your deadlift style, which is a slightly grim hobby. Here's the setup test. Hinge back until you feel your hamstrings load, then freeze. Now check where your hands are. If reaching the bar from there changes your lower back shape, the start is too low for the range you have right now. That's useful because now you have something you can actually fix. And here's the question to ask when the weight gets heavy. What changes first? Does the bar leave slowly, or does your lower back shape change before it even leaves the floor?
So that is the cause. Now the stake. If the weight is the same, why does rounding matter so much? In a neutral deadlift, your spine handles the load much more like compression. That is the kind of loading it deals with better. Add lumbar flexion, and more of that stress shifts towards shear. That means more sliding force through the discs and the tissues at the back that handle it badly. So the problem is not just heavy weight, it is the angle. The same bar gets much less forgiving when the joint position changes. A fully flexed lumbar spine under load tolerates roughly 40% less compressive load than a neutral one. Same weight, worse angle, bigger problem. That is why this matters even if you've never felt pain. You're deciding what kind of pull you're building. In one version, your spine stays rigid and your hips do the work. In the other, your lower back bends while it also takes the load. Treat neutral as the position you lock before the bar leaves the floor. Do not hope to fix it halfway up. If you cannot hold it at the start, lower the bar to a height you can control. And if this kind of simple mechanical fix is useful, this channel breaks down one lifting problem at a time in plain words so you can actually change something in your next session. Now we can name the issue. This is borrowed lumbar flexion. It's that last little bit of movement that should have come from the hips but comes from the lower back instead. That name matters because it tells you what's really happening. Your lower back is not mysteriously weak. The setup is asking it to move because your hips cannot reach that position yet. Under load, that is what turns the lower back from a rigid segment into the part that bends. And this is why bracing harder still fails. Bracing locks in a position you already have. It does not create new hip range. If the setup asks for more than your hips can give, your lower back takes the movement and the load. More weight just makes the same position less forgiving. So here's the actual fix for today's reps. Make the bar reachable before your hips stop. Raise the start an inch or two with blocks or plates, or shorten the range to where you can stay neutral. Then brace hard and pull from there. This is the right height for your current hip range, so you can keep your lower back neutral. Send this to the friend who keeps saying, "Just arch harder," every time someone folds at the bottom. That cue needs a short holiday.
Now the promised cure, clearly. Own the start height first, then lower the start over time as your hip range improves. Those are two separate jobs. If the bar starts at a height your hips can reach while your spine stays neutral, your brace finally has something solid to hold. That is the point. Setup fixes today's lift. Hip range work fixes tomorrow's setup. People often try to fix today's setup and improve hip range inside the same deadlift start, and that usually works for neither. They try to improve mobility inside a loaded deadlift start. A loaded deadlift start is the wrong time to try to improve mobility. Change the range first. Train the hips separately. Then come back and test the floor again. For your next session, do this. Set the bar high enough that you can push your hips back, feel your hamstrings load, keep your chest set, brace, and hold the same lower back shape before the bar breaks the floor. If you cannot do that from the floor, do not pull from the floor yet. Pull from the height you can control. And over the next few weeks, lower the start slowly. Go from higher blocks to lower ones, then to the floor only when the same shape stays there. Use the same hinge test every time. Hips back, hamstrings loaded, brace, neutral held. If your lower back shape changes, you have gone lower than your current hip range can control. Stay there and build it. That is how you make this harder in a useful way. You progress this by keeping the same back shape and lowering the start only when that shape holds. So keep the simple version. If your lower back rounds on deadlifts, stop treating it like a courage problem. Your hips usually ran out of room first. The fix is to make the start reachable with a neutral spine, brace there, and build the hip range separately. And one thing to remember tomorrow: your back rounds because your hips cannot get you to the bar cleanly yet. So set the start where you can reach it before your lower back has to help. Then brace and keep it neutral. Join if you want the simple version of lifting mechanics every week, the stuff that changes your reps fast without drowning you in jargon.